Delighted to be here. So as Claire mentioned, my name is Angela Redmond. I work in the recruitment space for many years. I'm a white female with shoulder length brown hair. I'm also wearing glasses, and I'm wearing a grey cardigan. And my background is a little bit blurry because my house isn't the tidiest and I'm at home still. So enjoying that experience. I suppose it's become the new norm for a lot of us. So what I might do, I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to talk through a couple of slides to give you some very practical advice around what to do when you have that interview. You know, and just it's important to, I suppose, start by celebrating that you have your interview. You know, yay, it's a great achievement. It means that your CV is working. And just 1 second and I'll get that should be working. So congratulate yourself, give yourself a pat on the back. I hope that's Claire, maybe you'd let me know that everybody can see that okay. Is that, yeah?
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
That's great. And what I'm not going to focus on anything around, you know, highlighting your abilities or disabilities or when to mention anything around that space, because I know Stephen Kelly from Ability Focus spoke extensively, you know, about, you know, that side of disability and what accommodations previously. So I'm just going to focus very much on how to nail that interview. So you've got your shot and you want to do the best possible interview that you can do. And ultimately what you want out of it is to get that job offer, you know, because an interview is just another step. You don't have to be the best interviewee in the world. Your job is unlikely to involve being an interviewee, but you do need to really be very strong to kind of present yourself in the best possible light in order to get the job. You know, once your foot is in the door, really having great interview skills is probably going to be quite irrelevant, but it is something that you need to be strong in to make the most of the opportunity. So as I mentioned, well done. The other thing I suppose to bear in mind as well is that at the moment, employers do tend to be a bit more flexible and adaptable. And a lot of this is because now that we're in our remote working landscape, a lot of us are still at home, like I mentioned already. They've had to be. So previously they might have had, you know, first round interviews all face to face, expectation that you would come physically on site. Now they've adapted all of those. There's tends as well to be shorter gaps in between if it is a multi-stage interview, you know, so they've speeded up everything. They've made it a lot more accessible, and that's good news. So, and it just means as well that you're unlikely to enter into a more, you know, drawn out process where you're kind of that sort of limbo land. You're not exactly sure where you're, you know, where you're at. Is it still live? You know, which is quite an unsettling place to be. So the first thing I would say is just gather your information. So treat it like a project, like your homework, like you would any important project that you're doing. So what do you need? So get interviewer, obviously, or plural, whoever's interviewing you on if it's a panel or whatever, their job title. And this is, you know, any information you find out, I would then have a look at them maybe in LinkedIn, even if you just get a sense of the person and, you know, see what they look like, where they've come from. It's not necessarily that you have to, you know, do a really in-depth analysis here, but I think it would make anybody feel just a little bit more confident if instead of just having somebody's name, you can find out a little bit more about them. And obviously their job title could be a good indicator of the types of questions they're going to ask. So for example, if you were going for, you know, an IT support role, for, you know, the IT manager is probably going to have different types of questions to ask it maybe than the HR manager, or if there's a person from finance there. So it can give you sort of a little bit of a heads up or a little bit of a clue if you understand what their role is in the organization. And obviously the practical things, the date, you know, the time and place, if it's going to be on site, all of them, you know, how long the interview is going to last, anything that you can find out about, you know, the basics, the format of the interview as well. You know, if you're working with a recruiter, if you're working with an internal talent acquisition person, if you're dealing directly with the line manager, it doesn't really matter. Just ask them, can you let me know about the format of the interview? What can I expect? You know, is there going to be some sort of like a psychometric testing? Is it going to be competency based, which is probably most likely to be, you know, just so that you're just saying, you know, what's the structure? Job spec and your CV. So have the specification of the job spec to hand, and obviously your own CV as well. And I've mentioned interview handbook. This is a really valuable tool that CPL, where I work, produce, and it's very much up to date. So there's a lot of really good practical advice around remote interviews. It gives you also a bit more information around, you know, types of questions that you may be asked, types of questions for you to ask. So well worth having a look through that. I have actually shared that with Claire already, and I've shared another handbook that we produce around CV. I know that this session isn't addressing that, but just around writing your CV. So, you know, have both of them ready to hand. And then any other information. So around the company's website, you know, as my kids say to me, just Google it, see what you can find out. You know, you might want to look at Glassdoor for previous or current or previous employees' reviews. Anything you can gather up that you think, oh, well, this will be good for me to address, or to, in my research, you know, to have to hand. So what I'm going to do now is focus a little bit on remote interviews, because whether, you know, in the future, I would imagine we're probably going to see a little bit more of a blended approach. Up to now, a lot of the interview processes have been entirely remote, and just because, you know, the reality, I suppose, of the way things are. But even if this changes in the future, they still will play a part. You know, companies have got used to them, they see the value in them. And certainly maybe for a first round interview, I would say the expectation is that it will be a remote. So the first thing, I'm going to look at 4 S's, just to kind of keep it as manageable for you. And the first one is to know that you're going to be seen. So I know, I'm sure you're thinking, yeah, very obvious, but the thing to remember about that is that you need to make sure that you look the part. So dress like you would have if you were going to an interview in person. You know, make the effort. It's just important to, if you're ever unsure and you're thinking, oh God, well, I'm not, you know, I don't want to look overdressed, err on the side of looking like you made a little bit too much effort. That's much better than being too casual, or maybe the perception being that, you know, you didn't really care as much, or a little bit blasé. And, you know, we've all got a lot more casual, you know, since working from home, but you are going to an interview. So the expectation is that you're going to turn up looking like you're fully prepared, and you're committed, and you're going to, you've already kind of taken that first very basic step. It doesn't seem, 1 second. Oh yes, okay. So the next thing is the software. So what are they going to use? You're probably fairly familiar with software at this stage. Although I was just saying to Claire and Jess before we came on, I've learned to expect the unexpected with software, no matter what tool or what technology. Just make sure that you download it if you haven't already, that you test it maybe with a friend or a family member or a colleague, or with somebody else that is supporting you, so that you're 100% comfortable. And then it's maybe no harm if you're at home and there's other people maybe streaming, or, you know, whatever, playing games, using the bandwidth, just ask them, look, it's a really important interview. Would you mind staying off? If you think that your Wi-Fi is a little bit, not 100%, would you mind just giving me the bandwidth for this hour? Just because, I want to make sure that everything goes 100%. Having said all this, like I mentioned, expect the unexpected. So if something does happen, like just there now, my thing wasn't clicking. I was like, okay, what do I click instead? Please don't let it throw you. Managers and interviewers are so used to something not, it's I would say in my role, it's nearly rare that everything goes perfectly smooth. You can often have a situation between somebody's pets barking, something goes a bit dodgy, they can't hear for a second, somebody's pressed the wrong button. Don't worry about that. Just say, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what happened there. Hopefully we're back on track. Or worst comes to worst, you lose it altogether. Again, don't let it throw you. Try and see if you can log back in and just get back into it. If something does go completely wrong, worst case scenario, you just say, look, I'm really sorry, something happened, can we reschedule, or can I come back on in 5 minutes, or just try and, but the one thing that you don't want to do is kind of let it completely throw you. Your train of thought is gone. You're sitting there, you're not concentrating on what you're being asked, because you're thinking, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And, I wonder what they're thinking now that, they couldn't see me for 5 minutes, or they couldn't hear me, whatever. Just move on and refocus and get back into, because you will not pass an interview because something like this happened, but you might not progress because you let something like that, completely throw your train of thought, and you weren't able to deliver the answers that they need after that to make an informed decision. Having said that, be confident as well. I'm sure it'll all be grand. So the setup itself, our third S. So your camera angle, your lighting, your backdrop, can you get advice about this? Talk to somebody. Even, it can be little things like if you move that down, all of a sudden you're there. If you're up here, it's not good. You're kind of stretching up. You don't want to be now you're not, you're not making a film either. So Susan, you don't need to get overly carried away, but just, ask somebody, how do I look? Can you give me any advice? Should I move it this way? Like I actually have my laptop just up on a game, Chain Reaction, the hilarious game of Follow My Leader. So there you go. And actually, I was in my sister-in-law's house the weekend, and she has her work laptop on 2 games. So Monopoly and all these games never came in as handy as they are at the moment. It doesn't have to be anything sophisticated. It's just whatever works, and whatever, when they're looking at you, that they're focusing solely on you, and literally, in the best possible light, and that there's nothing distracting, there's nothing taken away from the important message that you're trying to get across. So then our final S is around the sound. So making sure that you've good, clear sound. Now, typically that's not an issue. If you have, most people's speakers are grand. But again, I suppose maybe just saying to others, will you please don't interrupt me? I just need everybody to stay quiet, or, if you can go down to a room and put a notice on the door, whatever it is. Again, like I mentioned, it's not the end of the world if, so the child comes pounding in or you're flat, but what it can do is it can sort of put you on edge. If you're a bit worried, you're like, oh God, who's coming in the front door now? I hope they don't come down, knock on the door into the room, they'll throw me off. So do your best to cover that one. So there are your 4 S's, that you're going to be seeing, the software, the setup itself, and the sound. All quite basic, but I would say, really important just to get right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the interview itself, because as I mentioned previously, you've gathered up, if you like, you've done your research, you've all your information, you have your CV, you've got their job spec, you've got, your LinkedIn, you've been looking people up, you've found out as much as you can about the company. Maybe you've asked around if other people know anything about working there. You've got CPL's handbook. Great. So it's all sitting there. But at this stage, it can feel a bit daunting. It's like, all right, okay, where do I start? How do I structure this? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break it down into 3 sections. for you to focus on. And within those, there will be other elements as well. So the first part of, and these would be common to any interview that you go, the first thing, and it is absolutely key, is what they're looking to see is that you can demonstrate you can do the role. So can this person do the job? So how do you show that? So you show by highlighting your relevant experience, your skills, technologies, whatever it is, language abilities, that you already have. So what have you done in the past that could indicate you're going to be a good fit for this role in the future? So focus on your achievements, what you've done and what you made happen. If you have anything that's tangible, that's measurable, you know, so you worked in this. So what did you actually achieve in that role? You know, I increased, you know, sales, productivity by such a percentage. I was part of a team. We reduced stock loss, attrition, you know, we made process improvements. I was nominated for a recognition, an award. So try and, okay, that's fine. So that's a great example. So if I, you know, if you're thrown off thinking, oh God, whatever, wonder what they heard, the recording went, you just get straight back into it. That's fine. So like I mentioned, so you're focusing on what you've done, anything that you've, you know, that you've actually achieved, that where you stood out, and you're matching them up to the job specification. So you're using their language. So if you worked in a role or you've got previous experience and it was maybe called something else, you know, call it what they call it, use the same terminology. And you want to make it sound as relatable and as relevant as absolutely possible. Now it might not, maybe you don't have loads of experience, you know, in roles, but what you did in college, maybe volunteer work, you know, so think about anything that you've been involved in that you think, well, yeah, I can showcase that good teamwork because when I was, you know, worked during the summer in XYZ, or when I was a volunteer looking after this or whatever. So don't, you know, don't get caught up too much on that it has to be in this in the working environment either. Work with what you've got. That's all you can do. And then elaborate on your transferable skills. So maybe you don't tick all the boxes, but they wouldn't be interviewing you if they didn't see that, you know, there was potential there, or that, you know, if you're thinking, well, I haven't done that, I haven't done that, done a bit of that. Well, this is your job. Put your best foot forward. So what did you do that was maybe similar? You know, maybe if it was a certain technology or, you know, some sort of package that you used, and you haven't used that particular version, or you haven't used it, but you've used something that you think, well, look, you know, I haven't used whatever X. However, I have used Y, and I know there's a lot of commonalities. Even if you say something like, well, look, I know I can come up to speed really quickly. In, you know, my previous project, or when I was in college, or wherever, my previous role, I hadn't used Excel, but I went in, I did some courses online myself, and I was able to come up to speed with basic Excel or intermediate Excel, you know, within 3 days or whatever. So something like that. But so I'm confident I will be able to get up to speed, to learn quickly, because this is something, again, I've done in the past. So rather than just saying, oh yeah, I'm a quick learner, you're giving it a little bit more evidence and a bit more reassurance by providing an example. And then competency-based questions are increasingly common, even if or behavioral based they call as well. And it's basically how have you demonstrated this a competency that they're looking for. And the handbook is great for this, because there's about 12 competencies, or 15 at the very most, that a company will ever look for. So what you need to do is have a think about, well, for this role, they're probably going to look for that one. They're probably going to look for that one, depending on the level of the role, what you'll be doing. Use your common sense as well. Think, well, if I was interviewing, what would I like to see? You know, if it's communications, good teamwork, you know, if it's a very senior level role, it could be around leadership. So pick out the competencies, and then what you need, build up. I used to call them stories rather than examples. So give me a story. bring me on a journey of where you've shown this competency, where you've demonstrated it. So talk about a time, and maybe it's great attention to detail, whatever it is that, and using the STAR method. So the STAR is the situation. So what was the situation? Build a picture of how things were. Then what was the task? What actually needed to be done? What was actioned or achieved? So what was done? And then the or is what was the result. So if you use that format, and if you have a good story for maybe most of them, sometimes you can adapt. You can adapt what you've said, even if that exact one didn't come up. It could be something else that's quite similar. And it's no harm to over prepare. Like if you're thinking, well, I've got a story for most of them now, or I've got a really good example, but they didn't really ask me. They only asked me about 2 of them. Sure, no harm. You had the other ones there. You were ready with them, and it'll just put you in a much more confident and a much more comfortable position, thinking, well, whatever they throw at me, I'm going to have a good example. I'm going to be able to talk it through. One thing to be careful of this as well is speak I did this. So I took, because if you're using we, it can sound a bit fudgy, or it can sound a bit grey. Well, what did you actually do? So build up your examples, your stories. Again, if you have some from the workplace, great. If you don't, think of outside work, think of anywhere that you think demonstrates what they're going to be looking for. And practice all these. Like, I'm a big believer in scripts when I started in recruitment, as long as they're your words. So even if you think of, just even write it down, learn it off. No harm. It won't sound robotic, and it will inauthentic. It will sound true, authentic, because it's your words. But maybe you just want to put a couple of pointers down again to make sure that you don't forget, that you keep yourself on track. Okay, so that's all around demonstrating you can do the role. The next part is showing that you want the position. And you might be thinking, well, why would I be coming to the interview if I didn't want it? Like, surely that doesn't make any sense. And fair enough. Yeah, you've turned up, you've done your preparation. That, in itself demonstrates an interest. But let's go over and above. So you want to really show them, really convince them that you're the right person, and you feel the same. You feel that this is the role for you. So how you show that is show that you've done your research. So ask some really good, insightful questions. It could be around the company culture. It could be about how they've adapted over the last 18 months, working from home. It could be about their future plans, maybe career progression. And there's some good questions in the handbook as well, if you're not sure what type of questions to ask. But have a think yourself too, like, what do you want to know? What's important to you? Because there is a two-way element here. You want to be able to know, ultimately, if you're offered the job, whether you want to accept it. So ask, a question, but this would not be the time, I would say, particularly in a first round interview, to start asking questions around remuneration. So pay, what about sick leave? What about flexible? Because that they're all important things to find out. But at this stage of the interview, this is about you, doing your all singing, all dancing, impressing. And then when you get to the final stage, or, just coming to the offer, if there's anything there you're unsure about, then of course you get clarification on exactly what the package is going to be. But so try to think about questions that you're coming across as eager, enthusiastic, your body language as well, nodding, smiling, looking engaged, even simple things, sitting up straight. And then it's no harm to say that you want the role. Just say it straight out, now, not in a, please, 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 I really want this job. No, you're not desperate. They're very lucky to have found you. So you want to keep an element of that as well. But say something like, yeah, it feels like a great next step for me. Sounds like exactly what I've been looking for. I really feel I could thrive in this role. So something like that, just saying, I'm extremely interested. When do you think you'll be making a decision? So again, if you're thinking, okay, I'm not really sure, write a couple of questions or a couple of those lines down, put them into your own words and practice them. Practice saying them somewhere, so that they sound natural and they sound like the type of language that you would use. And then our final area, you're thinking, well, what's left is, do we like you? So don't confuse this with, are you like us? So it's not likability in terms of similarity, but do they think you're going to be a good egg? Are you going to fit in with the team? You know, or are you going to upset people? Are you going to be some, now, you know, in some roles, this is fundamental, any sort of teamwork role, that you can work well in a team. So it doesn't have to be about working independently, working on your own. It's just about, you know, are you going to be a good, decent addition that'll add and everybody will get on grand with? So how do you show that? So examples of where you were a good player in the past, that you helped others out, that you were generous with your time, you were altruistic in your nature, you went the extra mile. And this is where kind of involvement in corporate social responsibility or volunteers or anything that you've done over and above can really come into play and really differentiate you. And try and sort of include it, if you can, in as natural a way as possible. So this is not going to be specifically a question. Okay, demonstrate that we like you. It won't come up in that way. So it's just important for you to kind of think, okay, so how am I going to, at some stage, kind of get this into the interview? You know, so maybe like for example, in our house, you know, we're quite involved in a community garden. So, you know, if I was going for an interview this week, I'd definitely mention something about, you know, Halloween was great, but when you're involved in putting on an event in a community garden, you know, you feel the horror because you're so tired at the end of it. But it was brilliant to see the kids' faces and that everybody was so thrilled with it all, especially seeing as, you know, and we're so restricted. I'd just tell a little story about that. You know, it's great to have Halloween over. You know, of course, now the next big build up. I'm also involved, you know, in Scouts. Well, I'm not actually. I am in the community garden, but if you're involved in Scouts, say, you know, it's great compared to this time last year when we really couldn't do anything. That we're finding a way to get back into it and to support people. You know, if you help older people in the community, anything that you do that just shows that you're a good egg and you care. I think this is really nice to try and, as I said, blend it into the interview. And it'll also show your personality, which is the next point, because it can be very challenging in an interview situation to really, you know, be yourself, be relaxed, you know, show your personality. It's like the whole nature of it. And especially if it's a remote interview, I think that can even add an extra layer. So just do your best. Again, don't get too hung up on it, but smile, appear friendly. It goes back to the enthusiastic one as well, but you know, just as best you can, just try and show a little bit of you. So that's the three areas of the interview. The mistake a lot of people make, you know, in my experience, is that they focus almost exclusively on the first one, showing they can do the job, and they kind of forget about the other two. And they sort of think, yeah, of course they know I'm up for it and I'm keen. Sure, I wouldn't be here. And then, do we like you? You know, it can be, well, look, I am who I am. It's like, well, you are who you are, of course, but they forget that you need to make a little bit more of an effort of coming across as the type of personality that is going to work well with everybody, is, you know, because the first part, you know, even if you're a genius, the best in the whole world, if they think you're going to come in and upset the whole team and not be a team player and just all be about you, then the chances of them hiring you is unlikely. Okay, so my next piece of advice would be around doing a mock interview. So mock interview or trial interview, all this is just a pretend interview. So it's just a trial run. So if you're not working with a recruiter or you're not working with an internal talent person, just rope in, think of your friends, think of family members, whoever you can ask that you think could be, you know, provide you good advice. Even if you're thinking, God, they haven't done much in interviews, I'm not sure how much advice they'll be able to offer me. It doesn't matter. The very fact that you'll have done it once will help you, and it will just make you feel more confident. So go through the key elements of the interview. Obviously you don't know what they're going to be asking, but saying, well, these were my examples if they asked me this. Yeah, you can send the other person maybe the handbook that I mentioned already, and they could pick some questions out of that to say, you know, typical interview questions. And then if you can get a little bit of coaching, a little bit of advice, even, you know, if they're saying, okay, you're sitting perfect, you just need to move this thing this way, that way, all the whole shebang, anything that they can offer you that's going to be helpful. And crucially, if it's a remote interview, you'll be testing the technology and the setup as well. And ultimately, like I said, it'll just build your confidence, and know at the end of it, you got this. All you can do is your best. And ultimately, if you've done your best, you've covered all these elements, you've gathered all the information that you need, you've done your research, you've put some thought into the 4 S's, the seeing, the software, the setup, and the sound. And you've prepared for the 3 elements. So demonstrating that you can do the job, that you want the job, and that, you know, they like you or you'll fit in well. So those 3 elements, you've done your mock interview, and then that's all you can do. You've got this. And at the end of the day, you know, if you don't get the offer, then you don't get through, you've no reason to kind of kick yourself. You've done all you can do. If you didn't get this one, it just means that an even better one is around the corner. So have confidence, and you will get there, but it can take a bit of effort, and it can feel, I suppose, a bit overwhelming or a little bit daunting, especially if you haven't done an interview for a long time. Or ironically, if this is a job that you really, really want, you know, sometimes people do much better interviews if they're a little bit 50-50 about it, because they don't feel quite as, you know, as emotionally invested. But follow the process, cover off the answers, know that all you can do is do your best, and then the ball is back in their court. You can't do anything else. So I'm hoping that's given, I might just come back out of that then, and stop sharing. Everybody some helpful advice, and I suppose some insights into the whole area, which, like I said, everybody struggles with. Sorry, just trying to stop that. Yeah. Everybody struggles with, to one extent or another. I don't know anybody who will say, no matter how much experience they have, no matter how many interviews they've done, oh yeah, interviews, I can walk in. And actually, if they do have that attitude, they're probably going to come across maybe as a little bit arrogant or a little bit cocky. So it's perfectly natural to feel a bit nervous, feel a bit apprehensive. Do your preparation and use your, if you like, your nerves or your to put your best foot forward, and then, like I said, it's up to them then. So I'm happy to answer any questions. If anybody either wants to put them into the chat or unmute and just ask, because I think we don't have a huge big group, so that might be an option either. Or any other medium that you like, or if you'd like to spend a little bit more time reflecting on it and you think of questions maybe afterwards, that's fine too. You can maybe go back to Claire and she can pass the questions on to me, or, you know, I'd be very happy to offer any further advice. Just to clarify, I don't actually work as a recruitment consultant anymore. I'm the Learning and Development Manager in CPL, but so I train, if you like, our recruiters, and so I'm not directly involved. But as Claire mentioned, I have years and years of experience. So I'm hoping those couple of pointers and little nuggets of advice will be of some help and support you in your journey.